They thought he was just a janitor, a man who belonged in the background, someone whose presence barely registered in their polished world of suits, ties, and million-dollar deals. His name was Kenji Martinez, and every morning he walked into the corporate building, wearing a faded blue uniform, with a stitched name tag and worn-out shoes that squeaked against the shiny marble floor. People barely looked at him, except when they needed the trash emptied or a spill cleaned. But today was different. Today, the laughter followed him everywhere, echoing in the sterile hallways of the 35th floor. It started early when one of the young executives, Brandon, found Kenji sitting on an upturned bucket in the corner of the conference room before the big meeting began. In his hands was a book, brightly colored, filled with illustrations of characters with big eyes and strange hair. Brandon snorted and called out, "Yo guys, check this out!" The janitor's reading cartoons. A few others came over, curious. And soon the room filled with smirks and muffled laughs. Kenji looked up calmly, his deep brown eyes betraying no embarrassment, though this wasn't the first time he'd been mocked for it. "It's not cartoons," he said softly, his voice steady. "It's called manga." That only made them laugh harder. "Manga? What even is that?" One woman giggled, balancing her latte in a perfectly manicured hand. "Sounds like some weird janitor hobby." Brandon leaned closer, pretending to squint at the pages. "Wow, he's even reading it backwards!" "Dude, you're doing it wrong." Kenji didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He simply closed the book gently, as if protecting something precious, placed it in his locker by the door, and picked up his mop again. As he turned, he heard the whispers behind him. "Maybe he thinks he's Japanese." Someone joked. "Probably just trying to look smart." Another replied. What they didn't know was that Kenji wasn't pretending. He could read Japanese fluently. He could speak it, write it, even understand the smallest cultural nuances that most foreigners miss. Years ago, before life pulled the ground out from under him, Kenji had been a dreamer, a language enthusiast who once lived in Japan for 2 years, working odd jobs, studying every phrase, every kanji stroke late into the night. But that was before everything changed, before his wife fell sick, before hospital bills devoured their savings, before she slipped away, leaving him with their little girl, Amelia, and a mountain of debt. So he took the first job he could find, this one, a janitor. A man who cleans up after others while they climb ladders he no longer has the strength to reach. They didn't know any of that, and he didn't tell them. People see what they want to see, and to them, he was just the guy with the mop. The morning dragged on, laughter still lingering in the corners of the office, until finally, the big moment arrived, the meeting that would determine the company's future. The entire board gathered in the sleek glass-walled conference room. The CEO himself was there, along with the sharpest minds and brightest suits the company had to offer. The air buzzed with anticipation because today, they were meeting Mr. Takahashi, a powerful Japanese investor whose decision could bring in a multi-million-dollar deal. Everything had to be perfect. The presentation slides gleamed on the giant screen, the contracts were neatly stacked, and everyone rehearsed their smiles like actors preparing for a show. And in the far corner of the room, almost blending into the shadows, was Kenji, finishing his cleaning before quietly slipping out like he always did. But before he could leave, the doors opened with a soft hiss, and in walked a man whose presence silenced the room. Tall, poised, with silver-streaked hair and a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than Kenji made in a year. This was Mr. Takahashi. 2 assistants trailed behind him, but it was clear who commanded the space. The CEO stepped forward eagerly, extending his hand. "Welcome, Mr. Takahashi! We're honored to have you here." Takahashi nodded politely, but instead of speaking English as everyone expected, he began in Japanese, "Abenruze gosi turchu sampirzazishi. Thank you for inviting me today." The CEO froze for a fraction of a second before recovering with a nervous smile. Yes, welcome." But then Takahashi continued. His tone formal, but layered with something deeper. Tian shu shao when tu however, I have some concerns about the proposal. And just like that, panic flickered across the CEO's face. They hadn't expected this. No one had brought a translator because they assumed Takahashi would speak English. Most foreign investors did. Someone at the back frantically pulled out a phone, whispering, "Google Translate quick." But Takahashi kept talking, his words flowing smoothly, filled with terms that no app could capture accurately. The CEO glanced at his team in desperation. Millions of dollars hung in the balance, and they were utterly lost. And then it happened. A calm voice broke through the tension, speaking in perfect Japanese. Gia singpei lizekia jutita ufi bufen gio. Zohua kitiu adigo. I understand your concerns. Which specific parts would you like to discuss? The entire room fell silent. Every head turned toward the source of that voice, and what they saw left them speechless. It wasn't the CEO, it wasn't a senior executive, it was Kenji the janitor, standing tall in his blue uniform, mop in one hand, speaking flawless Japanese as if he were born to do it. Mr. Takahashi blinked in surprise, then a slow, appreciative smile spread across his face. Oh, I'm surprised you speak Japanese. Kenji bowed slightly, his tone humble yet confident. Sasal likor, yes, just a little. The CEO's jaw nearly hit the floor. Brandon and the others who had laughed earlier looked like ghosts, their smug expressions wiped clean. Kenji walked forward calmly, setting his mop aside. Sir, he said in English to the CEO. If it's okay I can help translate. The CEO stammered, why yes, of course, please do. From that moment on, the atmosphere shifted completely. Kenji didn't just translate words, he translated meaning, tone, respect. He knew when to bow, when to pause, how to soften phrases to maintain harmony. He navigated every cultural nuance with the grace of someone who had lived and breathed it. Mr. Takahashi seemed impressed, even amused. He began asking Kenji personal questions, curious about his background. Where did you learn Japanese? Kenji smiled faintly. Ruben, don't. I used to work in Japan, a long time ago. The conversation flowed so naturally it felt like two old friends reconnecting. The executives sat there, silent and stunned, realizing the man they had mocked was saving the entire deal. By the end of the meeting, Takahashi wasn't just satisfied, he was delighted. He agreed to the deal, even adding a generous bonus clause. And then, just as everyone exhaled in relief, Takahashi turned to the CEO and said something that would change Kenji's life forever. Promote this man. The CEO didn't need a translation for that one. The conference room emptied slowly after the meeting, but the silence was deafening. The executives who had laughed earlier couldn't meet Kenji's eyes. Brandon lingered for a second, his mouth opening like he wanted to say something. But no words came. One by one, they left, leaving Kenji alone with his mop, as if nothing had happened. Except everything had. The CEO approached him with a tight smile, still processing what he had witnessed. Kenji, I don't even know what to say. You just saved us a deal worth more than this entire floor combined. Kenji gave a small nod. I'm glad I could help, sir. The CEO hesitated, staring at the man in front of him. The janitor uniform didn't fit the picture anymore. It felt wrong now, like a suit on the wrong person. How do you know Japanese so well? He finally asked. Kenji hesitated for the briefest moment, then replied softly, I lived in Japan for a few years. Before. He didn't finish the sentence, because memories flooded in. The narrow streets of Kyoto, the laughter of his wife, the little ramen shop where they used to eat after long days of work. Before hospitals, before bills, before life became survival. The CEO didn't press further, he just said, Kenji, come by my office tomorrow morning, we need to talk. When Kenji walked out of that conference room something had shifted. People who never looked at him before suddenly noticed him. Some nodded awkwardly. Some smiled faintly, trying to erase their earlier mockery. But Kenji didn't care about any of that. He walked straight to the locker room, opened the small metal door where his manga still sat, and picked it up gently. The worn pages comforted him like an old friend. He remembered why he read them. Not to look smart, not to impress anyone, but because they reminded him of dreams he once had. Stories of resilience. Of characters who fought against impossible odds and won. In a way, those stories kept him alive. That evening, Kenji returned to his tiny apartment on the other side of the city. It was a modest place, 2 rooms, peeling paint, and a flickering light in the hallway, but it was home. The moment he opened the door, a little voice called out, Daddy. A small figure ran into his arms, giggling. Amelia, his 7-year-old daughter, with big curious eyes and a smile that could melt the hardest heart. Kenji scooped her up and kissed her forehead. Hey, princess, how was school? She grinned, holding up a drawing. I drew you today. He looked at the paper, a stick figure with a mop in one hand and a crown on his head. Kenji chuckled softly. A crown, huh? Why does Daddy have a crown? Because you're the best, she said proudly. For a moment, his throat tightened. She didn't know how hard he worked. How many nights he skipped dinner just so she could have enough. She didn't know the sacrifices, the pain, the humiliation. All she saw was her hero. and in that moment, Kenji promised himself, he would never let her down. They ate dinner together, simple rice and vegetables, and after Amelia fell asleep clutching her stuffed rabbit, Kenji sat by the window, looking out at the city lights. Tomorrow the CEO wanted to see him. What did that mean? A promotion, a better job, or maybe just a thank you and back to the mop? He didn't want to hope too much. Life had taught him that hope could hurt. The next morning, he put on his uniform like always, the blue fabric still carrying yesterday's stains. When he arrived at the building, whispers followed him again, but different this time. Not mocking, curious, respectful even. People looked at him like they were seeing him for the first time. He walked into the CEO's office, heart pounding. The CEO stood up immediately. Kenji, please sit. Kenji sat carefully, feeling out of place in the plush leather chair. The CEO took a deep breath. Yesterday, you didn't just help us. You saved us. Mr. Takahashi told me something before he left. He said, a company that doesn't recognize talent is blind, and he's right. We've been blind. Kenji stared quietly as the CEO continued, you're not just a janitor, Kenji. You're a man with rare skills, loyalty, and humility. And that's exactly what this company needs. So, here's what I want. I'm offering you a full-time position as a cultural liaison and language consultant. Full benefits, a real salary, enough to take care of your daughter. You'll never have to pick up that mop again. For a moment, Kenji couldn't speak. His hands trembled slightly. He thought of Amelia's crown drawing, of all the nights he prayed for a chance, just one chance, to give her a better life. And now, here it was. Sir? His voice cracked slightly. I don't know what to say. The CEO smiled. Say yes. Kenji closed his eyes briefly, then nodded. Yes. Thank you so much. When he walked out of that office, the world felt different. The same marble floors, the same glass walls. But this time the man walking down that hallway wasn't invisible. He wasn't just a janitor. He was Kenji Martinez. The man everyone underestimated, the man who spoke when no one else could. The man who proved that respect isn't worn on a suit. It's carried in the heart. And as he stepped into the elevator, he thought of Amelia, and smiled.